Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Amanda VINICKY. Parashats has the evening off. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first, some of today's top stories. After 2 summers largely shuttered by the pandemic, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot says Chicago is again truly open, and this Memorial Day weekend kicks that off. Even if the weather conditions today made conditions too hazardous for swimming, the city's beaches officially opened. Lightfoot says summer should be fun but safe, and youth must follow new, stricter curfew rules.
As mayor of the city, I want to be clear. Our children are welcome everywhere, anywhere they want to be. This is their city too. And we shouldn't be afraid of black and brown kids coming downtown. The issue is if the behavior is one that recognizes and respects people, property, and spaces.
This weekend, the city is holding programs that will stretch into the night in vulnerable neighborhoods so teens have something to do. Police Chief David Brown says extra officers will be on duty through Memorial Day. Illinois' senior U.S. Senator says he is optimistic. Negotiations initiated in the wake of the school shooting in Texas will lead to bipartisan action on gun control, like background checks. He says Uvalde could be the tipping point.
These graphic, beautiful photos of little boys and little girls and 2 loving teachers whose lives ended when a gunman came in with a semi-automatic weapon. That's not the only gun violence. And those are not the only gun deaths in America. We see them right here in Chicago. This week, we may have had 19 killed in Uvalde, Texas, but we had 6 just shot yesterday in the city of Chicago and 7 the day before, and 1 lost his life.
Durbin says the market has been flooded with AR-15s, and he believes there's no reason military-grade weapons should be so accessible. Durbin made the comments at Lurie Children's Hospital. Doctors there are using federal funding to train behavioral health teams in CPS schools. After a long wait, Illinois may be on the way to a proliferation of marijuana shops. They've been held up because of a lawsuit over a complicated and flawed licensing process, one that has prevented many people of color from getting into the lucrative industry. Today's ruling from a circuit court judge allows the state to issue 185 cannabis dispensary licenses. A state official in charge of awarding the licenses says Illinois will move swiftly to issue them. There is a chance, though, that more legal troubles could lead to more delays. Masks are recommended but not required at indoor public spaces in Chicago as the Centers for Disease Control moves the city to a high risk of COVID transmission. 15 Illinois counties are also at the high-risk level, including Cook and surrounding counties. The state public health department says as of last night, 1,136 individuals in Illinois were reported to be in the hospital with COVID-19. 123 patients were in the ICU. The city's 34 hospitals are caring for 200 COVID patients. In January, that number was about 2,000. Chicago's public health commissioner says the city is not reinstating a mask mandate because the healthcare system is not overwhelmed. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Tina Svandelis, chief political reporter at the Chicago Sun-Times, Becky Vivi, political reporter at WBEZ, but next month, Becky's joining Chalk Beat Chicago as bureau chief. Congrats, Becky. Also, Rick Pearson, chief political reporter at the Chicago Tribune, and Christian Farr, reporter for NBC5 News. Now, let's get right to it, starting off with what happened in Uvalde, Texas earlier this week. Now, Rick, want to toss this to you. If Sandy Hook, Parkland didn't lead to any sort of federal action, is there any reason to believe that this mass shooting is going to be any different?
I'd like to think so, but you just recounted the history and nothing. It was kind of interesting to note that Texas officials who were supposed to attend the NRA annual convention in Houston declined to do so, actually, I think, feeling some of the pressure of what their presence would mean there in the wake of this shooting. Yes, there are talks going on in the Senate Obviously, you've got a bill that the House passed 2 years ago that the Senate has failed to take up. At the very least, when you look at the poll numbers, and it's not a partisan issue, but when you look at things like universal background checks getting well over 80, 90% support of the American public, including NRA members, you have to wonder if maybe just the horrificness of this, and again, we're in this society that is instant, you know, we change the news cycle every 15 minutes, but just the horrificness of this, coupled with the details of the police in action at that school, you have to wonder if maybe, as Dick Durbin said, we have reached a tipping point.
So, Tina, you have covered D.C. politics, and as Rick noted, discussions have gotten underway in the Senate with Leader McConnell directing a Texas Senator, John Cornyn, to begin discussions on some sort of legislative response to this tragedy. What might that look like? Background checks, assault weapons ban, what?
I honestly do not have a lot of hope for that because we're in an election season and you're seeing so many states take over. Even the Texas governor, who was obviously all over the news this week, signing like 6 new gun bills last year in preparation for his re-election campaign. So it's sadly, it's a political issue. I do think that they should probably be listening to what Rick said, that there's public polling showing that people do want some sensible reform. But I do think it's pretty unlikely for that to happen.
And the politics, of course, get into as well redistricting and going more and more towards partisans, going even more partisan on each side. Now, there was mention just a bit ago of questions for law enforcement. And so there's, of course, revulsion at the horrific act, but also frustrations with how police handled this, long delay before breaching the classroom where this gunman was locked in with children. Let's listen to what earlier today the director of the Texas Department of Public Safety said.
The on-scene commander considered a barricaded subject and that there was time and there were no more children at risk. Obviously, you know, based upon the information we have, there were children in that classroom that were at risk, and it was, in fact, still an active shooter situation and not a barricaded subject. For the benefit of hindsight, where I'm sitting now, of course it was not the right decision. It was the wrong decision, period. There's no excuse for that.
Christian, benefit of hindsight, but also, unfortunately, not the first mass shooting in a school in America. How could police have so botched this?
You know, you got to learn from Sandy Hook, right? I mean, my daughter was born the same year that happened, and now she's the same age of these kids that died in this latest shooting. And you wonder, we know what active shooting is. We know what an active shooter is. I've been to active shooter drills. We just had the shooting that happened in Buffalo. We know that this is happening. You know, but also law enforcement is up against it as well, and we do have to understand the situation that they were presented with. There's a lot of barricade situations that happened in the city of Chicago, and they thought that this was a barricade situation, but you had parents on scene telling them that this was an active shooter situation. Should they have acted differently? Of course. Would that have led to saving lives? I think that's a toss-up up in the air right now, but it's something that we have to examine in hopes that we can avoid something like this from happening again.
To be a parent today, so difficult. Now, also, Texas Governor Greg Abbott did bring into the discussion Chicago. I'm guessing we're going to be hearing more of that at the NRA convention, arguing that stronger gun laws are not going to solve this issue, and the violence in our city is evidence of that. Becky, this elicited strong responses from both the governor and the mayor, saying that most of the crimes used in Chicago actually come from out of state, and that Abbott is wrong. Who's right?
Well, I think it is a little bit disingenuous to say that Chicago has strong gun laws. And I think, you know, the mayor is right in that a lot of the guns used in the city are they're not purchased in the city. They're not, you know, they're from out of state. And it certainly did anger her. She was very upset when asked about this and, you know, essentially fired back at him saying, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And so, you know, it'll be really interesting to see how, as Tina pointed out, how this is going to play out in an election year as well, because it's going to be an issue that every anybody running is going to have to answer for and make their stance clear to voters, because I think this is an issue voters care about a lot.
Well, shortly, I know I'll be asking about it. Rick, just briefly, you've covered a lot of presidential elections. Should we expect Chicago to often be a part of the conversation from here going out?
Oh, we always are a part of the conversation going out. And as Becky said, that issue about Chicago having strong gun laws for Republican candidates, it's always an example to use a Democratic city and point out that they have these liberal laws and they haven't done anything, when the whole issue really comes down to is federalizing some of these gun laws so that you don't have these out-of-state guns. You don't have the availability of straw purchasers to purchase guns for others to use. Right now, every state is on its own to deal with what it can, and that's what's going on here in Illinois and Chicago.
Well, Chicago, change is coming, with the city having placed its bet on a Bally's casino coming to River West. Actually, not just a casino, but an entire entertainment complex. Becky, the mayor clearly sees this as a win. Do you? Is this good for Chicago?
Well, it will certainly generate some revenue. It eventually will generate that revenue. We are seeing projections that by 2027, it will generate about $200 million. There are some folks who really question that figure. You'd need a lot of gambling to happen in order to hit that $200 million figure. But nonetheless, it will be some generation of revenue. There will be a hotel there. There will be property there that the city can tax. And the city has promised that the revenue from these gambling tax receipts will go toward our police and fire pensions. Now, we did a story this week to note something that budget officials have been saying that just hasn't quite, I think, bubbled up to the public consciousness yet. It is less than 10% of what we need for our pension payment each year. It is not, 200 million is 9% of 2.3 billion, which is the amount we need to pay into pensions next year. And so it is not a panacea. It is not going to mean that we are never going to have a property tax increase again. And then if you're a resident in that neighborhood, I think there are questions about traffic and noise, as with, any kind of sports or entertainment district or complex. It is the northwest side. It's not on the south side. There are some, folks who just are a little, not in my backyard about it. And really, when it came down to the city council vote, it wasn't about whether or not we were going to have a casino. It was about where that casino was going to go. And so this is the mayor's pick, and it passed 41-7.
All right, Christian, I want you to play your cards here. What do you think about both the location, and is this Chicago casting too big a gamble, considering that neighbors don't want this complex?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to some neighbors that don't want this complex specifically. There's a church that's near there that got kind of caught up in the middle of this. I mean, there's still a lot of questions about this, and the location, as we all know, is a busy area. So that's going to definitely transform that area completely. Is it going to answer all of our woes as it relates to money and revenue and things of that nature? I think Becky spoke to that perfectly. I don't think this is the perfect fix for Chicago. Is it going to be beneficial for us? I mean, it's definitely going to pick up tourism. I come from a state that allowed gambling to come in the state of Delaware, and it's been very successful there. But it's in a rural area. This is going to be right here in the city of Chicago. So we're just going to have to wait and see what it's going to look like in the next few years, or when Bally's opens up their first casino, to see if that's going to be the test model to see what this is going to look like.
Changing really the landscape of the city. Now, there was a lopsided vote, 41-7, to place this Bally's casino in River West from the city council, but still, that doesn't mean that things didn't get contentious. Here's just part of a very fiery exchange between Alderman Byron Sixto-Lopez and Mayor Lori Lightfoot, after the alderman accused the mayor's administration of being more concerned about campaign contributions than doing the right thing for the citizens of Chicago.
You are out of order. Now, you can express your comments and your views, but you will not tear down the integrity of people who are working just as hard as you are. That is absolutely unacceptable.
It is unacceptable to deny the right of answers to our community. Where will we address the issue of predatory practices of casino operators? We asked for a plan, Mayor Lightfoot, a plan to address that issue. That's what we need to hear from you. Not a plan that is going to be discussed after the fact.
You are out of order and you are lying. Almost every word that comes out of your mouth after you say your name is a lie. You need to stop, sir.
I'm not stopping because I have the right to speak. Enough of discrimination.
You are a liar,
I have
sir.
the right to speak as any other colleague. Enough is enough.
Yeah, enough is enough.
But we're going
Please
to talk about the facts.
cease and desist.
Everything I said here is a fact.
Please cease and desist.
Becky, you cover the city council. Was this as loud and angry in real life as it appears from that video? And what do you make of that exchange?
Yes, it was. And I would say that it's no secret that the mayor and Alderman Byron Sigcho Lopez do not see eye to eye, and they do not get along generally. This outburst on the council floor is not like anything I have really ever seen in the 5 years I covered the council. Even the previous mayor, who, you know, famously had a bit of a fiery attitude as well. But these are two, like I said, two fiery personalities who have, it's no secret they don't like each other and don't get along. Now, you know, she used some terms there too, cease and desist and out of order, that I think also, you know, we're dealing with a massive deal, massive legal deal that certainly, you know, if he's going to make accusations on the floor about parts of it, you know, her using those terms certainly made people in the press corps a little, you know, what exactly is behind this? Is there something else in the kindling of this fire? And, you know, beyond that, she didn't really comment on it when I asked her after the press conference, after the meeting.
Well, a mayor calling a member of the city council a liar on the floor there, this fiery temper. Tina, does this say anything? I mean, she is the mayor. Is this mayoral behavior?
I think that there's a lot of frustration in city council. Becky knows this. Anybody who's following knows this. There are people that are just upset about everything that's happening in the city. You know, the pandemic, violence, they're tired. There are people probably who no longer want to be aldermen anymore. There are people running for office. I think there's like 4 people running for office, 4 alder people. So I think there's just, things are bubbling up. And also this day was the same day the Texas governor was criticizing Chicago. It was just like a very high tension day for the mayor. And I think that both sides are kind of dealing with the bubbling tensions.
Well, Christian, does Alderman Sigcho Lopez have any point? Was this a rushed process?
I think that it was, and I think that it was already, I think a lot of people felt it was already set in stone, that, you know, it was just, you know, basically, who are we going to pick and where's it going to go? And so I think that people wanted a little bit more of a transparent process. They didn't feel that happened. We saw the alderman that did not go along with this expressed that this was, that they felt was a rigged process. So, you know, tensions are high in those meetings. I haven't seen it like that ever. And I wasn't there when it happened, but to hear that and to read it are two completely different things. But it's, you know, I think it's the way that politics are going right now in this country. So in some cases, it's not even surprising.
And I have to tell you, I found interesting the fact that certainly this was a big political victory for her after the 3 decades of attempts to try to bring a casino to Chicago. But then to see it quickly turned around as a campaign re-election issue of I'm bringing a casino to Chicago, elect me, re-elect me mayor. And I think those are 2 separate kind of things. I couldn't imagine a campaign based on I'm bringing a casino here.
There was a time that politicians, in fact, didn't want to be associated with gambling in any way.
Well, obviously we've got to turn the attention from the problems of the city to talk about positive things. But bringing a casino to Chicago in many respects is what's the best way to tap new revenues without having to go to property tax payments.
Not necessarily a get out the vote sort of issue, you're saying.
Correct.
Now, speaking of, early voting is already underway throughout much of the state, going to be beginning in Chicago on Tuesday. But Beyond campaign ads, we really haven't seen all that much of the Republicans trying to run for governor until, of course, this week when they took to the debate stage. That was on the evening of the Texas school shooting. That evening we had dueling GOP debates on both NBC and WGN. State Senator Darren Bally chose to talk trash about Chicago. Let's listen to a little of what he said.
Let's focus on the city of Chicago a minute. Let's just call it like it is. Let's think about Chicago, a crime-ridden, corrupt, dysfunctional hellhole. And no one knows that better than the friends and the people that live in Chicago. Something's wrong. City leaders, they hate the police. At least they act like they do.
Now, when pressed, Bally stuck by it, and he says that this is what he's hearing from residents. Christian, is he just telling it like it is?
No, I mean, I don't live in Chicago, but I've worked in Chicago for 16 years. It's not a hellhole. It's not crime-ridden. Do we have a gun violence problem? We do. It's something that I think needs to be solved in different ways than we are solving it, which is throw more police at it. That's not going to solve the problem. It's never solved the problem. But to call this city crime-ridden, We've got a lot of tourism. When I work on weekends, I see a lot of people downtown. There aren't people avoiding the city. We just had the census reports that came out about Illinois overall. And so it's not like we're trending downwards, but we're definitely a headline. I know that family members call me up and say, is it safe to be there? And I've gone in and out of these communities many, many times. And there are things that can repair this. It's the grassroots efforts, it's things of that nature. And that's where the focus needs to be. But to call it crime-ridden to me is just, it's a campaign stunt.
Rick, what is the strategy, do you think, here from Bally?
That's a great question, because basically what you heard was the kind of rhetoric that Darren Bally would deliver down home in Xenia, population 300 in southern Illinois. And when you're looking at, here's the fact that he seemed to be somewhat emerging in a 1-2 kind of race with Richard Irvin, you got to go where the votes are. The votes were up here. He finally started airing TV ads up here promoting himself. But at the same time, and I think people are more than just parochial, that when you talk about Chicago being a hellhole, I think that in Chicago land. And I'm very curious how suburban Republicans feel like that. Certainly there's plenty. Never want to go to the city, have no use for it. I'm perfectly happy in my little suburban enclave. But at the same time, this is the economy of the state of Illinois. And quite frankly, the farm materials that Darren Bally raises on his family farm, where the commodity prices set that determine how much Darren Bally is going to get paid for what goes off that farm.
And perhaps that'll be making it to a campaign ad someday near all of us. Now, Tina, you covered the debates. Anything that you learned new from these candidates?
I attended the Richard Irvin and Paul Schimpf and that Solomon debate. I did learn some things. I mean, my story says that they were trying to argue how conservative they are. So you did see some differences in some of the things that they want to do. They took on some topics like transgender sports, some gun issues, crime. I do think that we don't have a lot of details about their crime plan, just as Bally says he's pro-police and Irvin is so pro-police. And there are all these ads, but we really don't have a clue as to how they would solve any of these problems. So I think that's a big missing link in this campaign, and maybe they'll try to show that to us in the next 4 weeks. But I think time's running out, and we have another debate next Thursday. Hopefully we'll get some more details out of them.
Time also running out for this program. We've got a couple minutes left. Want to get to what we learned this week. Actually, just 1 minute from House Speaker Madigan, caught on a wiretap discussing secret payments to a political ally implicated in a sexual harassment scandal. Rick, Madigan is heretofore completely claimed ignorance. Now we have the receipts. What's your takeaway?
I think this is pretty damaging for the former House Speaker. I mean, Mike McLean was his right-hand guy. He was the speaker whisperer, if you will. He's supposed to be the conduit between ComEd and the speaker. And now that you have these tapes that we know that the feds have McLean and the speaker on talking about jobs, about Juan Ochoa on the board of ComEd, I think the potential for some very damaging more revelations are there.
And speaking of corruption, we also had a former high-ranking member of the Illinois House, that was State Representative Luis Arroyo, sentenced this week to nearly 5 years in prison. And if you haven't checked out any stories on that, wow, the sentencing judge did not hold back with a blitz of barbs, calling Arroyo a corruption super spreader and dirty politician on the take. So we're going to end it with those phrases because we're out of time. Our thanks to Tina Spondelis, Becky Vivi, Rick Pearson, and to Christian Farr. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on our Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. Be sure to join us tomorrow night at 6 for Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Then immediately after that, Chicago Tonight Black Voices at 6:30. Then we're back at 7 o'clock next week. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Amanda VINICKY. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great weekend.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.
A matinee at Chicago's most extravagant theater ended in the deadliest building fire in American history.
People described it as like something out of hell. It was just unbelievable.
And then,
Monday, April 13th, 1992 will long be remembered by